Hey guys, thanks for tuning into SimTech channel. This is tutorial number 20 on our series of learning C programming by coding. Now in this tutorial, we're going to learn how to generate a Fibonacci sequence. Now in case you are wondering what is a Fibonacci sequence, well, a Fibonacci sequence is basically a series of numbers where the next number is the sum of the two preceding numbers. Now to illustrate that, imagine we've got a sequence of numbers starting with 0 and the second number is 1. So in a Fibonacci sequence, the next number here will be the sum of these two numbers. So that's a sum of 0 and 1. So that is also a 1. And the next one will be the sum of the two preceding number 1 and 1, and that will be 2. And the next one will be 1 and 2, that will be 3. And so forth. You're going to get 5. And the next one will be 8. The next one will be 13. And you guessed it, the next one will be 21. So this is how a Fibonacci sequence works. So it is a series of numbers where the next number will be the sum of two preceding numbers. Now, we want to generate this in C programming. Now, you understand that basically just a business of incrementing variable and running them into a loop. So to complete this task, you have to have a good understanding of how C operators work. So that's your plus operators and your equal sign, your while loop, do while loop, for loops, and all of that. That is the basics C skills you need to implement this program. Now, without wasting any further time, please let's get started. Now, before we move forward, please don't forget to subscribe to SimTech channel and give this tutorial a thumbs up. That will be highly appreciated. Okay, now we have to decide which method we're going to use. Let's say we decide with a for loop. If we go with a for loop, that means we have to declare some variable that are going to be controlling our for loop. So the first one here, we're going to declare a variable of type integer and call him j. Now, this variable here is the one that's going to control our for loop. So now to start with, then we have to also start with some initializations of the first two numbers. As I showed here that we have to have two numbers in order to start. So those two numbers are your 0 and 1. So that's a sequence startup. So I'm going to go ahead and also initialize them. But before I initialize them, you have to declare your first two numbers. So we say first two numbers. First two numbers of type integers. So we're going to call the first one num1 and num2. Then we need to initialize them. So we're going to say num1 is equal to 0. And then num2 is equal to 1. Okay, so now that we've got our two numbers declared and also initialized, we can then go ahead and start by printing those first two numbers first. So we're going to just remove this line of code here, and here we're going to say Fibonacci, okay, like that, series. Then we have to go ahead and pass the two numbers. Since they are of type integers, we just go ahead and pass them, okay, like that. And then we need to reference the two numbers, so that is num1 and num2, like that. Now, if we run this program, we are guaranteed to have something on our screen. Let's just see what's going to happen here. Okay, Fibonacci series 0, 1. Okay, so we are good there. Okay, so now that we've got the first two numbers going, we have to now go ahead and create the next term. So I'm just going to create another comment here, and then I'm going to say next term or next number, whatever the case be. Now we know that the next number is also going to be a variable of type integers, and it's going to be the sum of the two preceding numbers. Okay, so we're going to now say int next num, okay, is going to be num1 plus num2. So that is the next term. So that's going to be, so this is the next number. It's going to be the sum of num1 and num2. Now, if we include the next num into our print statement here, we're only going to get a sum of 0 and 1, and that is going to give us also 1. So, which means this is where we need to call our for loop so that we can do some magic here. So, I'm now going to go down here in this statement, and I'm going to say for loop to print next term. Okay. Now, in this for loop here, I'm going to open for loop, open my curly braces, and then in this for loop here, obviously I need to print something. Now what I'm going to print in this for loop is basically the next term. So I'm just going to say printf %d because it's also an integer, and then I'm just going to pass here as next num. So here I'm printing the next number. That is going to be the sum of the two preceding numbers. But first, I need to do something here. I need to put a conditions for my for loop. Now we know that our for loop need an initialization. Since we have already j declared here as an integer, we can then initialize j inside our for loop as to be equal to 0. Now the next condition is a condition that informs you how many times will your for loop run. So basically, how many times do you want your for loop to print this statement? So now let's say we want it to print so long as j, this variable that we're going to increment, is less than or equal to a particular number. What's the number here? Now we can just decide how many sequences we want to print. Let's say we want to print 10. Okay, so we want to print 10 sequences, and the next thing here we have to increment j. Okay, so j is then incremented. Now if we run this program, we basically not going to get anything. We're just going to be printing the next term, which is taking the value of num1 plus num2, that is 0 and 1. So if we print this, we're not going to get our Fibonacci sequence. Let's just check it out and see what we get. So we're getting 0 and 1, and then a series of 1, 1, 1, 1. So that basically we're printing this next term, next num here, over 10 times. That's our condition for our for loop. But we're not getting the Fibonacci done. Why? Because we need to assign these num1 and num2 different values so that the next num can hold them. So to achieve our sequence here, we need to do a few tricks here. As we can see here, 0 is num1 and 1 is num2. And the next one here is actually the next number, next num. That is a sum of num1 and num2. Now, what do we need to do in order to get 2 here to be our next num? So we need to move the sums here of the sequence. So basically, num1 need to become num2. So the value of num1 must change to the value of num2, and the value of num2 must be the value of the next number. Okay, so that is what we're going to do. So we're just going to change here, num1 must then be equal to num2. So that's what we've done. So we just move the sequence here. So num1 is no longer 0, but num1 is then equal to 1, is then equal to num2 here. Okay, then we need to get num2 to move from its spot to the next one, that is next number. And then we're going to then print the value of the next number to be the sum of both num1 and num2, which are no longer 0 and 1, but 1 and 1. So, and that is going to continue over and over until we're done with our sequence printing. Okay, so we've already done num1 is equal to num2. We can then go ahead and say num2, okay, is then equal to next num. Like that. So num2 is equal to the next numbers. Now all of that is fine, but now we need to assign the next number value. So the next number value is going to be exactly the same thing that we've done here. So I'm just going to copy this thing and put him here. So next num is then going to be equal to num1 and num2. So the trick here is, after we print the next num here be 0 plus 1, we now coming here, we say num1 is now equal to num2. But what is our num2? Our num2 is this one here. But what is num2? Well, num2 will then be equal to next num. What is next num? We know that next num, we already did it here, was num1 and num2. So all this is fine. Now our C program come to the next line, it then say, next num here is num1 and num2. So num1 and num2, they are no longer these guys here. They are now this guy we just assigned here. So the next time we come into our for loop, we're no longer looking at these guys here to print our next num. Next num will then be equal to the sum of num1 and num2. Now remember, the next time we come to this line here, we say num1 is equal to num2. This time around, num2 is no longer equal to 1. Num2 have now been upgraded to be equal to next num. And then we print next num. And then we come back again. Num1 is equal to num2. Num2 was already upgraded equal to next num. And next num is this value here. So this is how we're going to achieve this Fibonacci sequence and over. Now let's just take a look at this by running this program and see if we're actually making sense. Okay, so I'm getting 2, 3, 5, 8, 13, 21. Okay, it looks like we are printing something, but we just need to print a space in between because we are not printing a space. We need to space them. So to print a space, because we can see here we are printing the first two here, there is a space here, but between this guy and this guy here, there's no space. So let's just print a space in there and run it again. Then we're getting the two sequence space. So we can see that the last one here, that is giving us a 144. So we can clearly see that 144 is a sum of 55 plus 89. So 55 plus 89 is indeed 144. Now let's just see how many sequences we have here. So that's 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13. So we've got about 13 sequences. So the issue here, we say that we just want 10 sequences, but it's printing 13 because we started by j is equal to 0 and we've had already 0 and 1 printed. So if we want to limit these to only 10 sequences, we then need to change our initialization loop here to something like 3 because we're starting to count from 0. So if we change it to 3, then let's count it again. Then we're going to have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Then we're having 10 sequences. Now to make your program more interactive, you can choose how many sequences that you want. So that will be by changing this value or by letting the user to enter this value. So now let's ask the user to enter a value. In order to do that, we have to add another variable declaration. So we're going to say sequences. So let's just say sequences. So the number of sequences. So then we have to go ahead and ask the user to enter the number of sequences. So that must be done before we print the first Fibonacci there. So we're going to say here number of sequences. Print f, enter number of sequences. Okay, so you enter the number of sequences, then we come here, then you have to scan f so that you can get the number of sequences that the user is going to enter. So %d, and then you're going to assign these to your variable sequences like that. The number of sequences here is then going to be asked from the user, and then this variable need then to be added into the for loop. So I'm just going to copy these guys here and then paste it there. Okay, now let's run the program and see what we're going to get if there are no funny story. Enter number of sequences. So I say 10, and then it print me 0 to 10 numbers of Fibonacci series. So as you guys can see here, we've achieved this Fibonacci printing using the for loops. But this can also be done using the while loop. It's just that with the while loop, it will be slightly different compared to your for loop. Now in the for loop here, we are printing the number of sequences. So we enter a sequence number and then it will print until the for loop condition is no longer true. But in the while loop, you will then printing until a specific next number have been reached. So to do that, I'm just going to include a while loop here, and then I will open my bracket. Then I'm going to copy everything in the for loop statement here inside the while loop, like that. Now in my while loop condition, I'm going to include a condition that will say that the next number here, next num, is less or equal to sequences. So I'm going to copy sequences and paste sequences here. So what this means is that I'm going to print my Fibonacci series so long as the next number here on the series is less or equal to sequences. Then sequences is a number that you're going to enter. So that basically means you're going to limit it to a particular value. So if you want your next number or your last number on the series to be 200, then you're going to enter a number that's going to be slightly greater than 200 because you don't know how the sequences are going to go. Now let me just comment this out and then see what is it going to give us. So I comment and let's run this program. Hopefully we're going to be getting exactly the same situation. So now let me say I enter 100. So now we no longer going to print 100 sequences, but we are checking till the last number here is less than 100. So when the next num is less than equal to the sequences, then we exit. Since the next number here, okay, after 89, it's going to be 144, then we exit the for loop because 44 is not less than 100. That's why we are exiting. So we only stopping right there. Now, if we want to go beyond 100, then we need to specify a bigger number if we want to go beyond 89 there. So now let's say if we want to get at 44, that means we need to include, let's say, let me just say maybe a 500 and see how far we go with the 500. You see, now if we include the 500, then we getting to up to 377 because the next number is then going to be 233 plus 377. That's going to be over 500. But that is not the case with your for loop. Now let's just comment this while loop again and then uncomment the for loop. And then when we run this, and let's try to enter the 500 that we did with the while loop. As you can see, I'm getting so many big numbers and I'm actually getting up to negative numbers now. Look at this. I'm getting negative numbers. So the reason I'm getting negative numbers now is because the integers here cannot hold these large numbers here. This is quite a large number. So let me see what it is. That's like a 1 billion. So my integer here cannot hold it. So I have to now either change my variable declaration so that I can hold all these big numbers. So this is it, guys, for these Fibonacci series printing sequences. If you've learned something in this tutorial, please don't forget to subscribe to SimTech channel and give this tutorial a thumbs up. Until next time, stay tuned for more C programming learning by coding.